our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Welcome, everyone. I tell you what, I will probably not be taking calls today, though I will be watching you guys on the restream very carefully. Hi, Bunny and Jeremy. I see you guys lining up there because I have a very special guest today. It is Dr. Naomi Wolf. She, of course, is a Rhodes Scholar, former advisor to Clinton and Gore campaigns, author of 8 New York Times nonfiction bestsellers. Most recently, End of America, Give Me Liberty, and her landmark bestseller, The Beauty Myth, which was highly praised by third-wave feminists. The 2007 book, The End of America, Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot, she lays out cases for saving American democracy. And more recently, I've heard her talking about the so-called 10th step of the 10 steps that would be tyrants use when they want to close down democracies and how we are getting into all that. Latest book, Outrages, Sex, Censorship, and Criminalization of Love. We'll talk about all of that. And what do you say there, Caleb? Can I bring in Dr. Wolf? Are we about there? Okay, let's bring in Dr. Naomi Wolf.
Hi.
Hey there. Thank you for joining me. It really is a privilege to have you. Thank you so
nice to be speaking to you.
You again, and as well, because we spoke on my HLN program years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And I think could that have been on the heels of The Beauty Myth? Was that around that time?
Well, The Beauty Myth was much
longer ago. Well, it's funny.
Ago,
okay.
So
I think
love your sense of time, but
I have no sense of time either as I've aged. But more importantly, I think that's not so much my constricted sense of time these days, so much as the way that book has stood out across decades. I mean, it really has. Now, I've seen you speaking a lot lately, and I know you've got some things you want to talk about, but I think I'm mostly interested in the evolution of your thought. I haven't seen anybody kind of talk to you about that. Is that an okay territory to get into?
Anything,
yeah.
Drew.
Great.
Dr. Pinsky is okay territory.
Drew's fine. Drew is fine. And by the way, I didn't finish your pedigree. When she went off to get Rhodes Scholarship, that was at the New College in Oxford. Then she went back and finished her PhD, and that PhD synthesis was one of the foundational documents for which book was that? One of your first books?
Outrageous.
Yeah, right. Okay. So before I get into what I'm curious about, I'm curious about something else that I know nobody else asked you about, which is, what is Gothic horror scholarship? Your father was a Gothic horror scholar, and I was what in the world? And to come from, I believe he's Romanian, right? Is that true?
He is. Yes.
So he was into Transylvania. I mean, this is such a funny, peculiar thing for the non-enlightened.
Well, he was a Romanian immigrant. He came to this country when he was 6 with his mom and his brother, and he grew up to become a professor of English literature. And there's a genre of English literature which is called the Gothic novel. It was very popular in the 19th century. Frankenstein is
Mary
a Gothic
Shelley.
novel.
Right.
Exactly. But there are a number of other Gothic novels from that period. And he, his mom's brothers and sisters, a lot of them perished in the Holocaust. And so as a result, he wanted to understand the nature of evil. So he was always interested literature about the monstrous, because he wanted to understand how, monstrousness could emerge in ordinary human beings.
That is
He passed away, unfortunately, 2 Marches ago. So
I'm sorry.
He's no longer with us, but he was a wonderful writer and a wonderful dad.
Well, I wonder, can we bring a little bit of his thought to life? Do you mind? Because it does seem like a sort of a pertinent thing for today's age, when everyone, I've been saying lately that if 5 years ago people came to me and were seeing Nazis and Hitler everywhere, I would put them in the hospital. And yet now we have this collective delusional anxiety. Some of it was focused on COVID, some of it on Nazis everywhere, some of it that our president is Hitler, and then that one's Hitler. It's the most bizarre phenomenon for me, this collective delusion we seem to be in, number one. But number two, it begs the issue of who really is evil. How do we know who the evil character is in a historical sweep?
Yeah, well, I think, looking at the current moment, it's evil to remove free will from people. And that's why our Constitution and our Bill of Rights is the most beautiful, sacred document, because it enshrines and protects free assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We have property rights enshrined in our rule of law. And when, you mentioned that I'm telling people we're at step 10, we're at the step of 10 steps to fascism in which the rule of law is suspended. And many of these new mandates, under the guise of what has been but is no longer a real medical emergency, are systematically stripping people of their freedom to assemble, their freedom to speak, their freedom to bodily autonomy, to make the choices that are right for them and their families, freedom to worship, property rights. These are all being stripped of us. And it's very scary. In the United States right now, there are some states that are reclaiming their freedoms, and there are other states in which kids can't even go to school. My stepson wears a mask all day in school for no scientific reason, and it's a very scary time.
Yeah, my son was actually working on one of the cases that's going before the California Supreme Court, in which they are giving, or they have granted it by the lower courts, and the Supreme Court seems to be leaning the same direction, absolute fiat sweeping privileges to the public health officials in the face of emergency, with no sort of due process to that procedure. In other words, how do we determine that something is an appropriate thing for the public health department to be? I mean, for me, from the beginning, I've been disturbed by what I saw to be excesses, the excesses you're talking about. For instance, the CDC and Dr. Fauci, who's somebody I admire. I've worked, I got involved in radio because in 1983, I was working in the AIDS epidemic, and he was encouraging young doctors like me to get on the TV and get on the radio and educate about this thing we had just started to call AIDS. Didn't know a causative agent yet. And mind you, that was 100% fatal at the time, and we weren't telling people, if you have sex, you're murdering people. I mean, it was now if you don't wear a mask, you're murdering grandma. You're murdering grandma. How we came to this is the most bizarre story when we look back on this, it seems to me. But be that as it may, the CDC never advocated closing schools. The CDC never used a word lockdown. The whole notion of lockdown came from the CCP and the desk of Secretary General Xi, as far as I can tell.
You're absolutely right.
So I don't know the direction we're going here. And by the way, public health abandoned all of their previous disciplines in terms of getting a population to buy in and to cooperate. They went instead to this weird authoritarian mode. And I saw it coming a year ago. And I got myself in trouble because my rhetoric was excessive, and I was wrong. I learned humility from the experience, and I made some really, frankly, wrong statements. But what I was upset about is I could see a press that was mandating the government to, if you remember, the New York Times editorial board took a position about what the public health response should be. And I was like, what? But these are words they don't even know the words they're talking about. Why do they have anything to say in this regard? Do you remember back about 1 year ago now, if we dial the clock back almost exactly 1 year?
I mean, there have been so many shocking claims of the right of public health authorities to intervene, where, as you point out, it was never part of pandemic preparedness, even in absolutely horrific pandemics or epidemics like the HIV crisis. We never, restricted the civil liberties of HIV positive people. We never told them they were not allowed to have sex, or that we would check to see if they were wearing condoms.
We wouldn't dream of it.
We wouldn't dream of it.
But more, we wouldn't accuse them. We would not accuse them of being immoral if they were not listening. We would accuse them of not understanding or not kind of having the buy-in. Yeah.
Exactly. Jay Bhattacharya, one of the signers of the Great Barrington Declaration, a Stanford public health expert, made the same point, as have other really brave public health experts, one in Canada who, they made the point that 100 years of public health expertise and policy says you support the vulnerable, you help them get the help they need, and you encourage people to go about their business. You don't stigmatize people, you don't shame people. As you say, you reach out for voluntary buy-in, and I would have been fine being told, this is how you protect yourself. That's how you manage a public health crisis. Polio, smallpox, cholera, typhus, HIV, tuberculosis, I think I said tuberculosis, we've been through many of them, and we've never suspended people's civil liberties like this or moralized health. So you're right to worry about the CCP, because the idea of lockdowns did come from communist China, and it was exported around the world. And there's a great deal of advocacy for these kinds of measures that weaken Western democracies, and it's money flowing from China as well as from big tech and a few oligarchs who are profiting from the lockdowns and who would really benefit if we never got our freedoms back. So it's a very serious situation. And honestly, there's so many lies being told. In Massachusetts, it's still a state of emergency. In New York State, I get an email every 30 days saying that Andrew Cuomo has extended the state of emergency. But I've crunched the numbers. They're very misleadingly reported. There are fewer fatalities in New York from COVID than from suicide or opioid overdoses. And the average age of fatality is 82. And that's true in, multiple regions across the country and across North America. And people are being told, that businesses don't have the right to open. Children can't go back to school. My tiny stepson has to stay in a mask all day. For a non-emergency. And when I just interviewed someone who's in touch with the Board of Health, and they don't have any benchmarks for leaving the state of emergency. As she said, they've never had this much power before. And I interviewed the local Board of Health, and they said that the state Board of Health didn't give them any science to back up these policies. So it's catastrophic.
Well, that was how the this court case got issued, the suit that's now I think heading for the Supreme Court, which was on behalf of the restaurant. Can you tell me more about that?
Well,
I'm very weak, but it was essentially the restaurant association. They closed down after mandating all these very expensive sort of structural changes to how they operated their business in terms of allowing restaurants to have outdoor dining. They suddenly shut down outdoor dining, and there not been one single case of transmission to an employee or a client in a restaurant. In fact, there's never been one case of one outdoor transmission of COVID, except for 2 cases, I believe, that were documented in China that are suspect, but 2 cases out of 150 million. Okay, so they said, please show us the science. No science, no science. So they went through the lower courts, no science. Finally, they got to the head of the California Public Health, and he said, well, we had to do something, which, by the way, is the scariest thing you could ever have a doctor say, because that's how you cause something called iatrogenesis. That's how you hurt people. I had to do something, A, and B, I needed people to stop moving around. What? So, wow, that was his actual statement on the record. And then the Supreme Court is saying, too bad they have fiat authority because they were responding to the emergency. Who are you to say? So,
but I mean, other courts, other cases I've heard have said prove that there's an emergency. And in Germany, Rainer Fulmich is suing and pointing out that the PCR tests that have spawned these gigantic numbers are faulty. And he's also saying, show us proof that there's an emergency. So I'm not aware that there is an emergency in California.
Right. Well, we had a bad outbreak. Here's the problem. We have to stay in reality with all of this, right? We have to, it's easy to push back really hard and go, what are they doing? I mean, the school thing, again, just to put hang a lantern on another school issue. I'm not aware of any country that locked down schools other than the United States for more than 2 months. And because it was considered essential, and the effects profound and lifelong, and God knows how much the real effects will be yet, be that as it may. So, but I don't want us to spiral into us to get into a kind of a conspiracy mode ourselves. We had a bad outbreak. I had a terrible case of COVID. I have long hauler syndrome. It's a bad illness. It's nasty. You don't want it.
I don't doubt it.
And we had a really serious outbreak. And guess what? We got through it. in in California. We got through it, and we should have been, our public health should have been rolling out that vaccine much more rapidly than they did, and we would have gotten it through it quicker. That should have been one of their main objectives, rather than, I don't know what they're doing. They sort of getting on the TV every day and go, hey, 1,200 people died. I'm so sorry. If I did that at the head of a bed in the ICU and I have a difficult patient and started crying, if I had a resident that did that, I'd fire them. Let's be clear about this. So I don't know what they're up to, but in any event, I don't want us to get so far in one direction that we lose track of where we are, which is we were in a pandemic. It was nasty. A pandemic is defined by excess loss of life. So the idea of one life is too many defies the concept of pandemic. So that's just a faulty concept. It's awful. Pandemics suck. They are terrible. It's a nasty illness. And there are things we can do to mitigate. There are. The question that we're sort of raising, you and I, is how far do we want our government to go specifically to do that, number one. And then number two, who says? How do we decide what the right things are to do? And why was there a suspension of literally the entire history of public health and infectious diseases because the Chinese had done something? And by the way, one of the things that upset me back a year ago, this adoption, as you say, and exportation of the CCP's policy, it was so contrary to the basic principles of infectious disease management. It looked to me at the time like they were hiding something, like they were trying to hide, not just suppress something, but hide something. Now, I don't have an opinion about whether they were or they were not, but it looked like that and not like infectious disease control.
Yeah. Well, you're right to ask those questions. Let me take one step back and gently challenge something,
Please.
that you said.
Don't do it gently. Do it firmly.
Okay, I'll do
Go
it
ahead.
firmly.
Go ahead.
I mean, when I say there's not an emergency, that's not the same thing as saying we have not been through a terribly miserable pandemic. But I just want to say, like, an emergency in which there is emergency law is a war. It's an invasion. It's when in 1906, there was a terrible earthquake in San Francisco and the city was on fire. I've been to conflict areas. When the rebels hold the city, that's an emergency. When wildfires are burning out of control and it's unsafe to be in the street, that's an emergency. A pandemic is not necessarily a state of emergency, right? If people are able to get medical care.
I'm going to balance us again and just say that at the beginning, we didn't know for sure. It might have been an emergency. And so I thought, boy, this is excessive, but as a good citizen, I'm going to follow my leaders. They're preparing for the worst case. Good. It must be a tough decision to make. Okay. And then they wouldn't stop. That was the part that shocked me. They wouldn't let up from what should have been a very temporary sort of state of affairs.
Right, exactly. And so now I'm going to speak about so I guess what I really want to say about, waves of illness is that America has, and I'm saying versions of this a lot, America has been through horrific waves of much more serious illnesses.
That's true.
Without ever suspending the rule of law or freedom of assembly or freedom of speech, freedom to worship, property rights. That's how our system is structured. The Constitution doesn't say unless a lot of people get really sick, in which case, ignore all these rights and guarantees of the rule of law. It doesn't say that. The Constitution is meant for bad times, in fact. So I just want to say that the pandemic has been exploited, just the way terrorism was exploited, as a real but hyped emergency or a real but hyped crisis to suspend civil liberties and to grab powers. And that's really scary. And the second thing I want to say.
Now I want to go back to sort of the evolution of your thought. Do you think that any of the reasons why we have been so prone to, I wish I'd written down the words you just said, because you said essentially you've described hysteria and why we went to this hysterical measures. Do you think that there's been some sort of shift in our predominant character structure or something about our collective consciousness or our training or education or our family systems that have resulted in characterological something that has us prone to hysteria and delusion and, massive sorts of being gratified by these sorts of moves?
So I love the questions you're asking because they're systemic, and that's where we are right now. Systemic things are happening and being set in motion. I don't at all think that this hysteria is organic. It is absolutely being cultivated. And this is where I'm going to gently or firmly challenge.
Firmly, do it firmly. Go ahead.
Okay, so I will. Conspiracy
Makes it fun.
theory, because I have been a political consultant earlier in my life for the vice president and for the presidential campaign. So I've been in the rooms where huge decisions are made. And I often say things that people say, well, that's a conspiracy theory, because they're predicated on the notion that it's possible for 6 people to be in a room and decide massive historical events. But that is how it works. And the other thing that people don't realize is that first there's a goal that, at the highest levels of politics, and only after the principals have chosen the goal do they work backwards, give the goal to the communications shop or the advertising company and say, tell the story that gets us to that goal. So the end result of this hysteria is $24 billion, $23 billion, $26 billion, $110 billion up since last year for 10 tech companies, like the heads of the tech companies, right? And Amazon is up triple digit billions. Facebook is up. Zoom is up. Nintendo is up. Twitter is up. Social media platforms are up. Technology is up. Microsoft is up. And they're the ones who invested millions and millions of dollars in something called the COVID-19 Response Project in March of last year, whose aim was to pour advertising money into messaging how serious COVID was. And we also have Bill Gates, and he's invested in vaccines. So he has been pouring money into the New York Times, NPR, The Guardian, The Telegraph, the BBC, millions and millions of dollars for COVID education. So that's why you don't get coverage of things like vitamin D, which many peer-reviewed studies have shown really protects against the worst kinds of infections. I'm not a doctor, but many physicians writing peer-reviewed studies have found this. You don't get coverage of anything other than vaccines, and you get this kind of hystericization for everybody, when really only a small percentage of the population is at serious risk. And you don't get coverage, or you get vilification of serious scientists like those who signed the Great Barrington Declaration, who say, like, we need to do focused protection, support the elderly, support the immunocompromised, and everyone else should go about their business.
How about, by the way, how about how to manage your illness should you get it, which is the thing
that's so important. I never hear that. I literally never hear that.
I know, and I've been screaming about that because I had some very aggressive treatments that kept me out of the hospital, and they're available to everyone. The government has actually bought the medication, and it's sitting on the shelf. It's Decadron.
Is it ivermectin?
No, it's Decadron, which has now been shown clearly to be very, very effective, and bamlanivimab, a monoclonal antibody it's essentially free. Somebody will come to your house and infuse you with it. All your doctor has to do is sign up for it. You have to be over 55. You have to have moderate COVID, and it kept me out of the hospital. And when I started talking about it, the immediate pushback was, "Oh, you get special care." No. This is your government bought 800,000 doses, and it's sitting on the shelf. Your doctor just has to order it because everyone is so blinded by the hysteria. They're not thinking about what to do with the illness, which is our job. Right. And public health should be educating about that. Use telehealth. Absolutely. Here's how telehealth works. Here's some good telemedicine doctors you can get your access to. Talk to your doctor about Decadron. Talk to your doctor about monoclonal antibodies. If you're a long hauler, the vaccine may help you. Fluvoxamine has been shown to be useful in long haul and sometimes in some of the early COVID. There's lots of things to be done. And you don't have to get into the ivermectin hydroxychloroquine controversy. These are peer-reviewed treatments that are quite effective. But of course, we're not talking about it. We just sit in parallel. Anyway, I'm sorry. I keep going on these side.
Let me chime in and say, what else are we not talking about because of this distortion and manipulation of hysteria and misinformation, and silencing of voices who do try to talk about it. I got deplatformed multiple times when I, tried to just report on peer-reviewed studies that were critical of kind of the Gates trajectory. And, I'm just a reporter. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm just reporting from Science Direct and NIH and so on. But anyway, one of the things that I've really noticed is that the lockdown, if it was really about the virus and public health, you wouldn't be shutting people up indoors. You wouldn't be keeping people from breathing fresh air. You wouldn't be not talking, you'd be having free exercise classes outside, and you'd be making sure that everyone got fruits and vegetables. And, you wouldn't be keeping liquor stores open and closing, bookstores and hiking trails and classrooms and playgrounds.
Right. So I think that you're correct. You are correct that the transmission occurs in the home. And that's where we are locking people down. No one has ever locked down healthy people in the history of medicine, ever.
Thank you.
Number one. Number two, even though we both agree that the most significant misadventure of this whole thing will be the closure of schools, the second most outrageously, the thing that will appear the most outrageous in the rearview mirror in a following closure of schools will be closure of parks and beaches and hiking trails. That was a level of insanity. I knew it at the time. Nothing I could do about it. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I mean, I grew up in San Francisco, and when I heard that California was closing access to outdoors, I mean, I immediately thought something is horrifically wrong here.
Right.
And I really do blame publications like the New York Times, because I read the aerosol studies, and the Times and other major news outlets have really been badly misreporting those studies. As you point out, like, they'll talk about like the biker rally in North Dakota and say, well, this was a super spreader event. But when you actually read the peer review study, it just says that there was a big group of people, and some of them tested positive for COVID. But that it doesn't, causation is not, or correlation is not causation. It doesn't prove that they got sick there. And the only study, as you point out, that showed any aerosol transmission in a restaurant was, produced under the oversight of the Chinese Communist Party, has not been replicated. So outdoors, we should all be outdoors with masks on. We should be having classes outdoors. We should be hiking. We should be teaching. We should be exercising. We should be worshiping. And none of these are available to us. So something else is definitely going on. And one of the things that happens when you force everyone to wear a mask. I mean, I really see this as a war against the human. It's a war against human community. Technology cannot compete with humans touching each other, humans gathering to give each other support, people having a potluck or meeting in a bar, and propaganda can't compete with people having a potluck or meeting in a bar or a restaurant. In my view, the reason that restaurants and bars have been targeted and houses of worship is that that's where, if you went, you'd say, hey, haven't seen you for a while. How's your family? Do you know anyone who's gotten sick? Well, I knew a lot of people who, got sick early on, but they got better. Or, I knew 2 people in their 80s, they died. It's really sad. 6 people got better. Or no, I don't know anyone in the last 6 months. Or I know people who've stayed well from taking care of their health in the following ways. And then the whole edifice falls apart. So when I think that tech companies are trying to drive our kids onto distance learning, because that's a $300 million a year jump for just one company, I think Amazon is trying to keep us ordering in. I think there's a hystericizing deliberately to create a small circle of powerful and influential people who have basically stripped us of our rights. And that is not a conspiracy theory. I'm seeing how these policies are made. They have nothing to do with public health. More and more data is coming in saying open states and open countries do as well as countries and states with restrictions. The harms of children, if you're talking about public health, are being abundantly documented. Self-harming of kids, suicidal ideation among kids and teenagers, opioid deaths of despair. These are thoroughly documented. And it's not about public health. It's about a stealthy way to turn America into a police state. And that's where we're at. Some states are free and some states are unfree. And around the world, Britain just passed a bill called the Extension of the Coronavirus Act, which allows public health entities to detain possibly infectious children, and to suppress dissent and to strip people of rights and to defer elections for another 6 months and into the foreseeable future. They just got told they couldn't travel overseas, yesterday or this week. So we're seeing these absolute crackdowns on liberty around the world, but including in the United States. And I have to say, I'm a liberal and I'm a Democrat, but it's been really sad for me that I've been talking mostly to conservatives and libertarians about how to preserve our freedoms. And my own side has been uncritically accepting everything Dr. Fauci says when there is no science to support it, and accepting restrictions, including the ones that are harming their children. It's shameful.
I think you'd be surprised that he didn't say a lot of things he's being blamed for. It's just that he's been very political in how he's maneuvering, and it makes it look like he's signing off on certain things. But that's not, we can, it's not an important point. It really isn't. But
I mean, I got to say something there.
Yeah.
When you work for the President of the United States, you say what the President of the United States tells you to say.
That's
you say
right.
what the chief of staff has signed off, and you're not freelancing.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
no one can side. If he doesn't agree with the policies he's being told to represent, he should resign. Yeah,
you're right, and I see him struggling with all that because I've known this guy a long time, but he's a political animal, to your point. But I'm interested, but your political and philosophical evolution, though. I mean, you start by really writing about women's issues, right? And can you connect the dots for me from where you were philosophically and politically then, and how you got sort of so concerned about the restriction of our freedoms, how that evolution happened to you? I mean, is there a story there, I'm wondering, or was it so slow?
It's all the same. Like
it doesn't appear that way. I got to tell you, it doesn't look that way as an observer and an admirer. It looks like, whoa, how did Naomi get here? This is so far from where she started. It feels like. And so, please take it away.
I mean, thank you for your kind words, but really, I literally have always said the same things. Why was I drawn to the beauty myth? Because, to critiquing rigid ideals of beauty, because I saw how it infringed on young women's freedom of thought, confidence, creativity. I just want people to be free. I just believe that that's the greatest gift we have on this planet, and that's what we're here for: is free will, free thought, love, justice. And so I look at what oppresses us. Then I wrote about things that I learned about in my own life. I wrote about pregnancy and childbirth when I became a mom, and I saw how the medical profession was profiting from kind of processing pregnant women and women giving birth in certain ways that were not good for them. I wrote about civil liberties with The End of America and Give Me Liberty because, the same thing that leads me to be a feminist is the same thing that leads me to be a civil libertarian. It's like, feminism properly understood is just an extension of that Enlightenment era desire for everyone to enjoy
I want to stop you right there. So it's feminism, civil liberties, and freedom. Although I don't think you were as explicit about freedom when you were writing about feminism. I get the connection there. But is it that we have gone, and so what happened to our civil libertarianism? Have we become Rousseauian in the sense that we have to become intolerant in the name of tolerance now? We've taken, man, well, that's what Rousseau's conclusion was, right? Men have to be forced to be free, which ended up with the French Revolution. That was a great construct, Mr. Rousseau. By the way, if you want to talk about an ad hominem conversation, there was never, rare had there been a worse human being than Mr. Rousseau. So look at his history sometime. Left 5 kids on the doorsteps of a orphanage and carried around a sex slave, and had a woman that was a sex slave, and just would bear her children, and he'd force her to leave them on the doorstep of a orphanage. 5 of them.
That is really awful. I did not know that.
Rousseau, everybody. Rousseau, the man that says humans are by nature kind and benevolent, but they have to be forced to be free. So,
that's not my kind of civil libertarian.
Yeah. Well, no. I know specifically it's not. That's my point. It feels like that's what's happened to civil libertarianism in this country. It's gone all the way in this other weird direction where it's left you behind.
Yeah, sadly. I keep thinking of that quote from Reagan, "I didn't leave the Democrats, they left me." Like, I'm still a progressive, I'm still a liberal, but I see, as I said, I see my team gleefully, enacting Chinese communist style policies and restrictions. And it's making me really sad. I think I wasn't writing about civil liberties as much when I wrote The Beauty Myth and the more feminist books earlier in my career because we were free. Our civil liberties were in good shape then. And, since 2008, there's been a sustained assault on our freedoms. It started probably even before the Bush era, but it amplified in the Bush era and then escalated with Obama. I was one of like 3 progressives criticizing Obama for, droning American citizens and keeping Guantanamo open. And then I've just continued saying what I always say, but the times have become much more dire. I do think we need to reckon with the fact that China is pouring, again, millions, if not billions of dollars into influencing opinions here in the United States and in the West and undermining Western societies. I didn't believe this at first, but very thoughtful people in the intelligence community and in the world of statecraft have shown me primary documents that show that we are, in addition to the tech bros I mentioned who are benefiting from this situation, we're definitely being what's called tenderized as an enemy. China wants to be the global superpower by 2025. It's in their manifestos. It's very public. And people who have served in military intelligence and intelligence analysts have explained to me that there is such thing as subversion of a country, where you just try to, look what's happening around us. Our kids aren't getting educated. People are dying at home because they're scared to go to the hospital. No one's worshiping. Communities are unraveling. We barely see each other except through mediums like Zoom, which are owned by China, right? All of our DNA, and medical kind of data is being harvested, whether it's by Google or by other entities compiling a gigantic medical database where there's chaos, right? We seem to be unable to open schools again, which is the most fundamental building block of the next generation. There's division. There's our history is under attack. Our beloved, Dr. Seuss is under attack. I don't think that's just progressives. That's a sustained kind of assault on our way of life, our culture, our sense of ourselves as a nation, our children, our next generation. And it's called subversion, and a step on the kind of Soviet map of subversion that I was walked through by someone who's very familiar with these techniques is demoralization. And so if you look around at all these policies, what do? Parents are at a loss. They don't know what to do. Restaurant owners don't know what to do. There's no alternative. People aren't behaving in normal political ways. Like Gavin Newsom isn't saying, oh, gee, everyone hates me in California. I'm an elected official. I'll try to do something else. No, he's not responding. Unions are not responding, right? Yeah. So I think there's vast sums flowing to pervert our society into what suits, Bill Gates and big pharma and big tech, but also what suits our worst enemy, a totalitarian power that wants to crush American strength, initiative, the next generation, and wants us to be like in a feudal state where we can provide labor for whatever they're doing next, but we are not a real challenge to global hegemony. And I never thought I'd believe that, but I'm now persuaded from having seen sufficient primary documentation of that as a possible assault that's happening on us.
I need to take a little break, just like a 3-minute break. And what I'd like to do is come back and talk about solutions. Do you have solutions?
I
okay.
do. I have suggestions.
Good. Because and before I take this break, do you think, is there any thought, this is just sort of science fiction-y thing that I know people must think when they hear some of what you're saying, that AI gets into this in any way and is sort of running out of control somehow? Artificial intelligence. No?
I can answer that.
Answer that before the break. Yeah, before the break.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to answer that before the break?
Yeah, right now.
AI is a big tool to enact these policies because, when I get kicked off of Twitter, it's not a human being saying, oh, she appeared on Tucker Carlson and talked about uniting left and right, but AI can be programmed to just kick any conservatives or people who are talking about vaccines or people who talk about mRNA technology, to flag them, to warn them, to say you've got 3 3 more opportunities to not mention that again. That's not a human being. That's a learning algorithm doing that. Algorithms can dial down people like you and me and dial up people that Bill Gates funds, or, people who benefit from this, who support, lockdowns, for instance. So it's definitely a tool that's in use that is hurting a lot of people in managing their thoughts and managing what they see.
But it's not like it's itself somehow amplifying or spiraling some of what the tech stuff
honestly, you are asking a reasonable question. I think that with the mask mandates and the solution, again, as a political consultant, you work backwards. Like, what's the outcome? Distancing people from each other, keeping them at home, and keeping masks on their faces all the time, it kills off humans as a competitor for technology. That's such an inhumane, unhuman solution to the question of how do we build, support the expansion of technology, that I think it could come from game theory. I think it could come from AI as a question, like what are some solutions for how to expand market share, right? But it's human beings that are ultimately implementing those policies, and human beings like, Gavin Newsom, Andrew Cuomo, Governor Baker of Massachusetts are agreeing to what may be artificially generated proposals for how to get somewhere that then big tech guys, ad agencies, lobbyists present as a good idea.
Got it. Naomi Wolf is with us. You can follow her, of course, at Naomi R. Wolf. Is that correct? Naomi R. Wolf? Is that your Twitter
I'm at
handle?
Naomi R. Wolf on Twitter, yes.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll talk a little solutions in just a second. This pandemic began, we were not sure how it spread. Everyone began wearing masks and using hand sanitizers. Great ways to slow the spread, but a lot of people still get sick. I can personally attest to that. We now know that COVID-19 spreads via aerosols and droplets from the nose and mouth, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Why aren't we also sanitizing the nose and mouth, killing the virus directly at the place where it spreads? Why weren't more doctors thinking about this? Well, some doctors have done the research. Wish I discovered it sooner. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Halidine. It's an FDA-registered antiseptic for the nose and mouth that's proven to eliminate 99.99% of the virus that causes COVID-19 in just 15 seconds. That's right. It's created by a team of clinicians with decades of experience in antiviral treatments, initially created to protect healthcare workers. These are smart scientists, and it's a great product that also eliminates many other viruses and infecting particles. I'm using both their nasal antiseptic swab and their oral spray to help protect those around me, and you should be too. For others and for yourself. Whether you're hopping on a 3-hour flight, always use it there, visiting grandparents, or attending a meeting that you can't miss, Halidine's family of oral and nasal antiseptics give you the safe, easy, on-the-go antiviral protection for up to 4 hours. I encourage you to try Halidine at halidine.com today. My listeners get 10% off with the discount code Dr. Drew. That is HALODINE.com, discount code DRDREW. So obvious. It just makes sense. Stop the virus before it spreads and gets in your body with Halidine. Well, I too have struggled with GI issues over the years. I have something called Lynch syndrome, so gut health is extremely important to me. And while gut health awareness has increased, it's led to a wellness trend that's inspired a host of questionable marketing and some false claims. Now, you've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, even more. They may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our gut needs for proper function, but all too often the promises are in fact too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. Seed's Daily Synbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut health and can improve regularity and relieve bloating, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Synbiotic apart is the delivery system. While some products may offer the right strains, they're fragile, they rarely survive the trip through the gut, doesn't get where it needs to go, but Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure the probiotic reaches your colon, which is where they often are needed. I've been taking Seed's Daily Synbiotic, and I really encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20 for 15% off your first month of Daily Synbiotic. That is SEED.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20. As we're gradually moving back to opening schools and businesses and, of course, our in-person interactions, I want to remind you, this is all time with cold and flu season getting going. Staying hydrated is key to helping your body deal with the added stress and with the upcoming flu season. My regular fans have heard me talk about a product called Hydrolite for a long time now. It's an amazing rapid rehydration drink. It's a mix that, well, we're obsessed with here. I'm excited to announce they've just released Hydrolite Plus Immunity, just in time for cold and flu season. Hydrolite Plus Immunity starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of immune-boosting ingredients. Each single-serve, easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 300 milligrams of elderberry extract, creates what is hopefully immune-boosting formula that's high in antioxidants and zinc. Combining this with Hydrolite's 7 key electrolytes, it's a fantastic way to stay proactive and properly hydrated. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour powder sticks that rapidly dissolve in water and make a great tasting drink that has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors, and it is gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and it is vegan. And you can find Hydrolite Plus by visiting hydrolite.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that's HYDRALYTE.com/DRDRW. And be sure to use our code Dr. Drew 25 at checkout for a special discount. Dr. Naomi Wolf, of course, still with us. And thank you again. It's been, for me, a privilege and very fun and exciting to talk to you. Last time we had just like minutes because it's television. Here we have a little more of an opportunity to really talk. So I'm watching a chat stream while we're talking, and we've depressed everybody. So we now need to come up with some suggestions and some solutions.
Sorry.
So I'm counting on you, and let's see if I can sort of pile on to any of the ideas that you have.
Sure. Well, I hate to say it, but first we have to face it. So I know it's initially super depressing, but our forefathers and mothers have faced really horrible crises before and prevailed. So, number one, we kind of have to snap out of assuming that those in charge have our best interests at heart. And that's a very traumatic thing, especially if there's been like childhood trauma or lack of nurture in our past. But we really need to support each other.
It is, Naomi, it is a hard thing to accept. I mean, you're saying there's a cabal of people that want to rule the world, and I can't. My head doesn't do that. I wouldn't put those words in my mouth. I mean, okay,
we know the CCP wants to rule the world because they've said so many times. That's their policy.
CCP, notwithstanding. I agree.
Right.
I agree on the CCP. That is their goal. But I feel like people are just opportunists and taking advantage of this horrible state of affairs and kind of going with the momentum.
Absolutely. But when you say rule the world, I mean, you live in California. Big tech owes it to their shareholders to be as big as possible.
Yeah.
So, I am here to tell you that a crisis allows a lot of special interests to exploit the opportunity to boost their bottom line. And that's what's happening. It doesn't have to be like Dr. Evil.
Right.
It's just a bad combination of capitalism and human nature.
Okay. I think it's important to say that because I think people hear something different sometimes. So good.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah.
I think that we have to engage in civil disobedience peacefully. I mean, one of the things I did, for instance, where it's illegal to have more than 10 people in your home is that I invited people for an illegal potluck and I documented it on social media. And I told, Andrew Cuomo that there were leftovers in case the sheriff was hungry when he came to arrest me. I'm not trying to be flippant, and I take this very seriously. And I opened windows and I had hand sanitizer, but also people are adults. And it is, the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment says the government can't tell me who I can have in my own home. And, health is a personal decision. So, I've been, socializing carefully for months and months and months. Thank God I'm fine. But I think we need to role model to our kids, read the aerosol studies, talk to Dr. Drew, find out what's safe, and then socialize. And, if you can't take your kids to school, organize homeschooling with groups of children so they can play. If you can't get to a playground, put 30 kids in your backyard. They will not kill each other. Kids do not get very sick. All the data are in. If your business is closed, if businesses are starting to reopen, go patronize that restaurant. Go sit in that restaurant.
For sure.
Don't just order takeout. Just go there, support them, show your face. If you are, I mean, sue. If you've got money, if you're a lawyer, I'm in touch with a bunch of lawyers across the country who are issuing lawsuits. You mentioned one yourself, Dr. Pinsky. And the other thing is run for office. I've been calling out to people of all walks of life to run for state assembly, run for governor. Even, my life as a political consultant, even if you don't all win, or even if it's unlikely that you win, for the political class to realize that there's a coalition forming, and it's transpartisan, and people are going to run like heck, and they might be unseated. That's where you see change. And that's where you're seeing some, people kind of backing off and saying, well, maybe I'm not going to keep locking people down forever. Maybe I'll give back some of these emergency powers. But we have to do that aggressively, peacefully. And so I've offered my platform, Daily Cloud, for anyone who wants to run for office. I'll showcase on a Liberty platform, in any freedom platform. We're nonpartisan. I'll showcase your campaign, and we're going to post videos to teach you how to run for office and interview elected officials who ran, so that you can find out easily how to run for office. And I guess the last thing I would say is, when you assemble with people, go assemble, go worship. If your church or synagogue won't open, worship in the parking lot. Join Friends for meditation. We have to break through, especially in California and New York, our left-wing cohorts. We have to break through this hallucination that human assembly with ventilation and decent spacing is going to kill you. It's not going to kill you unless you are immunocompromised or very elderly. And we have to talk and love one another so that we can communicate, that we're going to mobilize to take back our freedoms and do it together. We cannot do it virtually. We have to reclaim human spaces.
I agree with you. And I have a couple things. Let me do this first. You bring together love and liberty more often than I'm accustomed to hearing those two words side by side. Can you tell me about that?
I mean, I think they're the same thing.
See, I don't get that immediately. Please tell me more. As love of liberty, freedom to love, I get that. But love and liberty, you bring them together as twins. They belong together.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that people who wanted to kill our ability to be free went after our ability to love, right? There's a reason you're not allowed to hug anyone or touch anyone. There's a reason our children are being kept 3 feet apart. If people forget how to love, they're much easier to subjugate. I mean, love is the most revolutionary force, and people can do great things when they're with people that they love or care about, or have people that they love to be courageous on behalf of. And every tyrant knows this. So that's why our history and our monuments are under assault. And it's also why we're being kept from hugging grandma, even if grandma wants a hug, or, hugging our kids or hugging our neighbor. They're safe ways to do it. If you're not breathing in people's faces and closed spaces, and you're not symptomatic, you've got hand sanitizer, normal precautions. Like, it meant so much during the AIDS epidemic for HIV positive people to be touched and hugged and not isolated and ostracized. People die of loneliness. People die of depression.
So it's an epidemic right now. And we've taken people whose life expectancy may be 5-7 years at the most, and taken away 20% of their remaining time, the opportunity to express their love and connection. And believe me, they're pissed. They're like, because they are not given any choice in the matter. They're cash in at best 20% of their remaining time. At worst, they may have died during this year or maybe next year and cashed in more than half of their remaining time in the name of somebody else's idea of how they should behave, rather than them determining for themselves the risks they wanted to take.
Exactly right, which is how immunocompromised or elderly people have always lived. It's their decision if they want to, see their grandchild, or maybe wait if the grandchild has a cold or has the flu. Like, that is just common sense and human decency. And the other thing, I guess, if you flip it around, I think liberty is love, because, and now we're talking kind of on a spiritual plane, but, if you love human beings, you want them to be free. And why should they be free? Free to love. Like, that's where creativity comes from. It's where human meaning comes from. It's where human community comes from. Like, all beautiful things we've created as a species come out of freedom and out of love, and where they merged together, and those are the things that are systematically being targeted in these policies that keep us from seeing each other's faces, touching each other, or being free to, go for a walk or have a town meeting and dream up a new possibility.
I hope you will speak about this more explicitly. I've not heard you say this quite that way, but the way you talk about this, I have a feeling would be people would be very receptive to it and find it very appealing. It's a unique kind of message that I've not really heard. And it kind of turns everything on its head a little bit, right? In the face of all the acrimony and the nonsense we're dealing with.
I hope so. I mean, all the people I admire most turned things on their heads.
Yes.
In a good way. I mean, people like Jesus and Martin Luther King and Buddha and all those good people.
Yeah, well, keep get that in the crosshairs, that message. I think that's pretty interesting. So back to the running of political campaigns. I have essentially no interest in this, but people keep coming to me and asking me to get on the governors. After the recall thing, they want names on the recall ballot, because the way it works in California, do you want recall? Yes or no? If it's yes, who do you want to vote for? And
think about it. I mean, think about it.
I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak with Governor Schwarzenegger. I'm going to talk to him hopefully next week, and I have two questions for him. How impossible is the job? Are you better off just being a voice out in the public, or you can't get anything done as governor, given what a sick institution our state legislature is? And how do you unravel your life to just go do that? I mean, I have people in my head that are in the military that are friends of mine going, your country needs you, your country needs you, your country needs you. And you're sort of saying the same thing to all of us. And when you hear those messages, you feel like you got to do something. So.
Well, Dr. Pinsky, I really do think you should consider it. And I also kind of want to reassure you. I mean, I don't doubt it's a big job, but people who lead at the highest levels, I've met them. They're not smarter than any of us. And also, you'll have a chief of staff. Like, you don't have to
have somebody else to do the work. Okay, good. Yeah, I know those. It is some of the smartest people I've ever met were chief of staffs of senators, particularly. They're just super smart people. Maybe this is a time. I'm sorry to interrupt, but anytime.
Even if you don't win, right? For you to say, you know what, I'm willing to have my name on the ballot. I'm willing to challenge, or on the referendum, I'm willing to challenge this tyrant because he's oppressed the people of my state. I mean, I'm thinking of running for state assembly. I don't, I don't expect to win, but I think that it will do a great deal to have someone of your stature.
It gets everybody into the
say.
Maybe.
And the other thing I would say,
gets us all into the idea of participation. But go ahead. The other thing.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, something really useful you could do is if you did agree to run, you could kind of document and explain what you learn on your journey so that other people can run as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that way you're teaching people.
I sort of dig that. That's that's another layer to this. Yeah. And then finally, is it too just so to go over the 10 steps that you document? Should we just direct people to the book, or is there a little highlight reel we can show people?
I don't think I can recite them in order, but there is a link that if you go to chelseagreen.com, my publisher has published a new introduction, and the first and last chapters for free that you can download. And you can see how the 10 steps relate to the current moment in my new introduction. It's also up on the AIER website. But basically it starts with invoking a terrible internal and external threat, which we have with this pandemic or former endemic, I think, in some parts of the country. Then you've got to develop a thug cast. We don't have that as much right now, but we could, and we're seeing it in Britain where police are being kind of weaponized to be very violent at protests, and in the Netherlands and other parts of Europe that used to be very peaceful civil societies. But I definitely think that I hate guns, but you can expect a lot of pressure to disarm Americans because it's very difficult to suppress a population that has access to self-defense. Anyway, step 3, you start to demonize the press. I don't think you need to demonize the press right now. I think what's happening is the co-option of the press by the millions that I described earlier, by Gates and pharma and other funders of the press. You recast criticism and dissent as becoming an enemy of the people. And you're really seeing that. You're seeing like, oh, if you criticize the vaccines or criticize Dr. Fauci, you're an insurrectionist, or you're going to kill grandma, like this moralizing.
Well, and then use of you're racist, you're sexist, you're whatever as another sort of way of scaring people off.
Exactly. And I don't want to get in the weeds here, but the CCP definitely has been documented to be weaponizing, racial and other divisions in our country and kind of inflaming those tensions. You also get, getting toward 9 and 10, you start to target people who are well known. I've been getting threats. The Moms for Liberty got 2 mailings of poop sent to them in special delivery. People are being deplatformed. Conservative voices have been purged from social media. Glenn Greenwald was bumped from the site that he co-founded. Influencers are definitely being targeted if they don't go along with the dominant narrative. You get to a point where people can't tell truth from lies. We're certainly there. And then the last step, I've skipped over some, but the last step is, surveillance society. And that's like vaccine passports are definitely part of this. The goal of the vaccine isn't just the vaccine and the billions to pharma, as well as, saving people's lives, obviously. But the goal of kind of digitizing everything around vaccines is to create a kind of social credit system where everything we do can be tracked. And it's the same platform. I run a digital company. It's not a difference, a vaccine platform and a social credit system. It's, it'll show who all your networks are, who all your friends are, what all your internet searches are. It's the same structure. And then step 10 is where we are, which is suspend the rule of law. And, this is where you stop having responsiveness. Like, this is where people are saying, send my kids back to school. And the teachers union says, no, we won't. And this is like, in the 1920s, when Mussolini took over, the legislators kept thinking they were in a democracy, and it was over. The black shirts were just like, no, we're not going to listen to you. You can legislate all you want. We're not paying attention. And that's where we are. That's what people are saying. Like, how can they close my business? How can they take my property? How can they tell me I can't charge rents for 6 months? Like this incredible intervention in people's rights and a complete lack of responsiveness. That's step 10. And you and I, you're in California, I'm in Massachusetts, we're living under emergency powers. This is a catastrophic crisis. There has not been emergency law in world wars. Like the last time I think there was emergency law in America at this scale was during the Civil War, and that was a mistake. So it's absolutely catastrophic, and we should treat it as catastrophe, and join together to fight against it.
In quieter moments when you're thinking about what it looks like as we come out of this, do you imagine a road out other than the recommendations you made? Do you imagine sort of how it goes down, or how things? I'm
really worried. Yeah, I'm worried about countries that are not the United States, like Britain. I don't see how Britain can get out of what just happened to them without bloodshed. God forbid. They have no recourse. They can't leave the country. They've been literally locked in their homes for months. And also, there's a psychological element that you and I haven't even talked about that much of. People start to go crazy when they're isolated and locked inside. There's a reason solitary confinement exists in prisons. It creates lasting changes to the brain. And at a certain point, when you lock a country down, they're no longer able to think clearly on a grand scale. So I speak about the United States. I hate to say it, but the more people like you and me and our viewers and our men and women in the street, all of whom are extraordinary, dare to dissent and dare to have those difficult conversations and be ostracized and have their family mad at them and say, "Are you crazy?" That really does help to break through the group hysteria, the mass delusion that we're in. And the more that people, like you and I, put our actions on the line and help other people's run ourselves, that will help. But I think that the great solution what we have right now is a new alignment of left and right at the grassroots against tyranny. And I'm having conversations with people I never thought I'd have conversations with. It doesn't matter that we disagree on a bunch of other policy positions. Now's the time, to be patriots and to come together above race, class, gender, political party to save our freedoms. And to question, let's be Americans, question authority. Just because someone's an expert doesn't mean they get to tell you how to live your life. The most important thing we can do is say, no, I refuse, and make our own decisions.
The fact that even the dialogue about whatever it is the authorities are saying has been shut down is what I find reprehensible.
Terrifying.
It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. I mean, it's how science and medicine are done, is by we go at each other all the time. And the fact that that's shut down, it's gravely concerning. It's gravely concerning. I hope, it's back to the UK thing. I've been hearing this bizarre phenomenon they have there of these so-called hate police, where people will come to your home. It sounds like the brown shirts. They come to your home and investigate if somebody's accused you of having said something. It's not even illegal. It's some sort of weird social police. It's very strange. You heard about that?
No, but a friend just told me on a walk this afternoon that the DNC has sent kind of a mailing saying, tell on your neighbor if they've said something hateful or if they've engaged in hate speech, and they're including hate speech, things like being a libertarian. So there is a kind of Stasi type encouragement of people to turn in their neighbors, and that has terrible historical precedents.
Do people not know that? Did they not hear the historical echoes? It's kind of hard to. Anyway, well, I'm depressed again. I got to find. We got to keep. I know we did. What about when we were talking about love? We were doing good. What about before things got so bad with COVID? I was thinking to myself, this country feels like it needs another Great Awakening. Little did I know the Great Awakening would be politics as the new religion. But I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for some sort of spiritual renewal of some type to also take hold.
I mean, I never like to tell people what to do with their spiritual lives, but I think the only way to get guidance out of this is going to be spiritual, however you define it. We're at an absolute crossroads as human beings and as Americans, and we have to, I've been praying a lot since this began, because I don't know what to do most days. I feel completely overwhelmed. The extent of the evil that is revealing itself day by day is so immense. But, the universe works in really mysterious ways. So I'm just checking the clock because
I'll wrap up.
I was like, I need allies. And I'm sitting in a beautiful place where I'm a fellow surrounded by allies here at AIER who I don't agree with them about a bunch of policy things, but we all agree on liberty. And, the universe sent me allies, and I'm like, I need, resources. And I'm talking to people who are wanting to give me resources to build out the campaign platforms. So I don't understand how that works, but as a matter of faith, I know that desperate people have asked for help in the past and, found strength and found community. But again, none of that works on Zoom. We have to be able to touch each other, look in each other's faces to regain our humanity and our strength and our ability to be powerful as a spiritual community, however you define that.
Yeah, it's funny you put it in that context. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think for me, spirituality is intersubjectivity, is the shared experience with other humans. That's where I find that most magical. But where are you now? Are you in New York?
Oh, I'm in a beautiful place called the AIER, the American Institute of Economic Research. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a
look at that.
Gorgeous stone house built in the 1920s, and it's full of libertarians, but they are very passionate to fight for regaining our freedom, and it's good to have allies. But I have allies across the country, so.
Well, you've been such an important voice for as long as you've been in the public and been publishing. So I knew I would have an interesting conversation with you, and I was not sure I would agree with you on everything, but I thought it would be powerful and interesting, and you did not let me down.
Well, thank you so much.
Beyond following you over on your Twitter handle at Naomi R. Wolf, with it's just like the animal wolf. Anywhere else you'd like people to go, or?
Yeah, people can join up on dailyclout.io, where we explain legislation and launch these campaigns, and we'll have model legislation for how to get our rights back. And that's my book, The End of America. And you can also see my writings on drnaomiwolf.com.
Dr. Wolf, thank you so much, and I hope I have a chance to talk to you again as time goes on, and keep abreast of your progress. And keep preaching love. I think that there's somewhere in there is a hook that people will respond to.
I trust you're right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pinsky.
Thank you, Naomi. And I am looking at you guys on the restream. Any thoughts you guys have? Let's see. You each have lots of. Batch wants to propose to Dr. Wolf, so there you go. Anybody else? Mama Juice, 4,000. Just a few over the top off my head. I'm not sure what that was. Okay, a lot of you are happy with the interview, so good. I appreciate that. Any other comments before I kind of wrap things up here, everybody? I'm watching the restream. She's an important person, important guest, important thinker, and I just appreciate that she's seems to be fighting the good fight. And you may not agree with all of her assessments or all her policy, but see, like Tom Segar says, solid opinion, solid facts. Jay says, spot on. Mama Juice, are you saying vaccines are the devil? Good luck. Okay, well, you guys seem to like the interview, so I'll leave it at that. And do we have we're probably in here tomorrow. Jordan, you know, are we doing a program tomorrow? We're not sure because Susan's been out a little bit. So what's that? All right, we'll maybe try to light something up tomorrow around this time. Thank you to Caleb for producing this thing. I'm still reading your guys' quotes here. Would it be wise to take just the first dose of Pfizer? Pfizer does not recommend that, but it's wiser than not taking anything, that's for sure. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and we will see you hopefully tomorrow.